indeed. Well, hello everybody. It's a great pleasure to kick off our year of Dundee Law School mooting activities. As some of you know, some of your teachers will know, Dundee Law School has been engaging with leading schools across Africa for the last 3 years, introducing high school pupils such as yourselves to mooting and the study of law. So in previous years, we have done face-to-face competitions in Kenya in 2019, in Nigeria, and in Ghana most recently in January 2020. And those have been fantastic events. I've really enjoyed getting out to meet you face-to-face, but obviously because of the COVID pandemic, it's not been possible to do those face-to-face activities. So this year, we moved online for the first time. And the advantage of that was that we were able to bring together schools from all across Africa to get involved in mooting, in the training, and then in our international mooting competition that took place in April of this year. We had 13 schools finally took part from 5 countries, from Ghana, from Nigeria, from Kenya, from Uganda, and from Zimbabwe. And I'm delighted that almost all of those schools are involved again today, and many more schools beside. And it's great. We've got 23 schools signed up to take part in our activities this year. And so we're expanding beyond just having a competition. We've sponsored mooting societies in each of your schools. So you should all now have received your mooting packs, a selection of Oxford University Press textbooks on contract, tort and criminal law and the legal system, as well as 2 proper court gowns. So when you are involved in the mooting, you'll be able to wear the proper attire. So in addition, we're going to be doing lots of extra training, introducing you to the study of law, giving you lots of expert advice on mooting. We will then have an internal competition or possibly a regional competition in January next year, just to give you your first experience of mooting. And then after that, we will move towards the final element of training, introducing you to the problem that will be analysed as part of the international competition taking place in April 2022. So because we've increased the scale of our activities, I've got extra people to help me. Libby is our new engagement officer in the School of Law, and she'll be overseeing all the administrative aspects of the competition and the mooting societies. And it's great to have her on board. In addition, we've got 4 trainers who are going to be working with you, giving the lectures and doing the face-to-face seminars. And who better to pick than experienced and award-winning mooters from the current LLB intake. So we've got Kelsey, we've got Louise, we've got Rory. You're going to struggle to pronounce his name, I guess, and we've got Scarlett. So they'll be introducing themselves in a few minutes' time. But before then, let me show you a couple of slides about Dundee Law School, because maybe you don't know where we are, you don't know what our law school looks like. So just to familiarize yourself a little minute, let me share my screen. Can I just check, Libby, that you can all see my screen? Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah,
thanks very much.
That looks good.
So I love having this as a sort of my introductory page, because this is a picture of the Scrimgeour building. This is the home of Dundee Law School, a wonderful 19th century building that sits right in the heart of campus. So if you do ultimately come to Dundee to undertake your English law degree, this is the building that you'll be based in. So just a little bit about myself, first of all. There I am with my barrister's garb on and my wig. That's not the reason I decided to become a lawyer, even though some of my children seem to think it was. I've been professor of law at Dundee Law School for almost 16 years now. I'm the university's academic lead for Africa, and it's great to be able to combine those roles. My role in law as a professor and leading on African activities for the university as a whole. And having these mooting societies, having these mooting competitions, it's a great way to combine those two elements. So I'm a barrister. I'm a door tenant at Chambers in London, a leading set of family law barristers, and I'm a member of Gray's Inn, one of the 4 Inns of Court, called in 1999. Now, my area of specialism and research and practice was in the area of private international law, particularly the family aspects of the subject. So I specialize in cases of international child custody, international divorce, and family law disputes. Where is Dundee? So you can see that we've got a map of the British Isles. You've got Dundee is there just 1 hour north of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, and Edinburgh is a 1-hour flight from London. So coming from different African capitals, so from Nairobi, generally it's a 12-hour round trip. From Lagos, about 10 hours. From Zim, it's going to be a bit further. From Entebbe in Uganda, a bit further as well. So there you see where we are. Dundee is a fabulous location. It's the 4th biggest city in Scotland, city of 150,000 people. The city sits on a huge river, the River Tay. You're going to see some images of it in a few minutes' time, and not far from the North Sea. So lots and lots of green spaces really close to our city, and it's very, very easy to escape into lots of wonderful countryside. So if you love outdoors, Dundee is a fantastic place to live, and that's one of the reasons why I've decided to stay here, and I enjoy living here with my family so much. So let me try and show you one of our new little videos, and I hope that you'll be able to hear the sound. But Libby, if you can confirm. You can't hear the sound. Let me. Okay, I think we've got. I'll just continue. I'll talk you through it. So these are pictures of Dundee. And Albert is now in the 2nd year of his graduate entry LLB, and he's been really enjoying getting out, enjoying the countryside, as I mentioned. So this is one of my favorite places close to university. It's a fantastic bakery. There are lots and lots of small shops and cafes and restaurants really, really close to the university. It sits right in the heart of the city. It's only 5 minutes from the shopping mall, 5 minutes walk from the train station. You can see here some images of campus. We've got a really diverse campus. We've got old traditional buildings like the Scrimgeour, where law is based, and also lots of modern purpose-built buildings. So when you actually listen to the text of this video, I'll send it to you afterwards. There's lots of parts of it about the African Caribbean Society that our African students love to join. Dundee has got a really vibrant community of African students. And here are images from one of the balls that they have put on, a real highlight of the year. Ife Fermi is another one of our LLB students. She's doing the 3-year program. She's from Nigeria. And there's Ife, also from Nigeria, doing the LLB. And yeah, she's talking there about how easy it's been to find African food. There are quite a number of halal stores and African stores close to the university. So you're going to see if he's explaining how close everything is to Dundee. Just see a little diagram. So you can see the campus so close to the city centre, right beside that big river. And here's our riverfront. This is sort of the real tourist attraction now in Dundee, the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's come from London and has established a branch in the middle of our city. So I'll just pause there, but you'll get to see the video properly later. So let me pass back to Libby to do the housekeeping. I'll be joining lots of sessions, but as I say, the main training will be the focus of Kelsey Louise, Scarlett and Rory, and they'll be speaking in a second. Before we get to them, let's hear to Libby, who is making sure we're all in the straight and narrow and that all the housekeeping matters are attended to. So Libby, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Very much appreciated. really, it just goes for me to say that we've got, we can't see or hear you obviously during this session. This is being run as a webinar. For the workshops, we're probably going to use Zoom meetings though, so that it's a much more interactive and discursive session. But we are recording this session, so if you miss some of it, don't worry. And we will be giving you details of our YouTube channel where we're going to be hosting all of these recordings, and you'll be able to share them with other students and friends. It'll be a resource for you to look at for future reference as well. So for today's session, a quick point out to how you can ask us questions, because we want to know as many questions as you have. Keep on asking them throughout the sessions. If you're anything like me, if you think of a question, if you don't write it down immediately, it pops out of your head again. So please make sure you ask questions throughout the session. And we, myself and Professor McAlevey, will moderate those questions, you know, to the students who are joining us today, and may answer some of those ourselves as well. So the Q&A function is down at the bottom of your screen. It's a double speech bubble. So if you click that, you'll be able to ask us questions, and we will decide whether to answer them in text or whether to answer them in real time. But there's also a chat function as well. So if you feel that you want to say hello to us and tell us what your name is and where you're from, then please use the chat function. But we do ask that you ask questions in the Q&A if at all possible. It's quite difficult to moderate both of those at the same time. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and hand over to our student team, who are going to introduce themselves and take you through our lecture today. Over to you guys.
Hello there, everyone. Welcome to our first session. It's great to see so many of you joining us today. My name is Rory, and I am a fourth-year Scots Law student in my final year at the University of Dundee, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it all. I'm from Edinburgh, originally the capital of Scotland, and I can confirm when Peter says the two cities are very close together, so it's easy to travel between the two. I have been involved with mooting for 4 years. I previously mooted in two competitions throughout the whole of Scotland, and I've also ran a few competitions myself. I will pass on to Scarlett now.
Hi everyone, I'm Scarlett. I'm a third-year English law student, and I'm also the president of the university's Mooting Society. I started mooting in first year, and I absolutely loved it. I want to get involved as much as possible, and I've competed in a few competitions, but I've also been lucky enough to train some people. And I actually, Albert in the previous video, he's also part of the Mooting Society, and I was lucky enough to train him recently as well. But yeah, I'm really excited to meet you all and get started.
Hi everyone, my name's Kelsey and I'm a third-year Scots Law student. This year I am the internals coordinator for the University of Dundee, which means I run the small school-wide competition. It's a lot of first years, so I'm aware of like how to train and talk to first years about doing this, because I know that it's something that's new and different and can be a little daunting, but you'll get lots of skills and experience from it, and I'm very excited. I've also competed in the internals competition myself and been involved in a Scotland-wide competition as well, and was very successful in that. So I'll just pass over to Louise.
Hi, sorry, I'm Louise Kelly and I'm a second-year Scots Law with Spanish student, and I was involved in the Mooting Society last year. I competed in the internals competition. I found it really useful and it really helped me develop my understanding of law, and I'd really recommend this experience to anyone. And this year I'm going to be participating in an externals competition, which I'm really looking forward to.
So to start off, we're just going to speak a little bit about law, a brief introduction. Obviously, a moot is a mock appeal court, so you'll be using the law a lot. And if you're looking to study law, this will be really useful as you come into your first year. So to begin, like, this lecture will be about just a general introduction to law, but specifically what constitutes the law, if I say that the law is this, does that mean anything? Or does it have to be, if someone else says it, does that mean anything? Understanding who can make laws, what is law, and specifically understanding that in England and Wales. There are different types of law, civil and criminal, and we're going to distinguish between them. We'll be dealing with both in mooting, so understanding the different things that applies to each of them. Grasping the structure of the courts in England and Wales. Like I said, mooting takes place in an appeal court, and we'll go through what all of that means, what the difference between all the courts are, where different cases might be heard. And then we're just going to learn all the keywords that will come up over and over again, just get a quick definition of them so that you're not left stranded if you hear them around. So to begin, what is the law? The law is a body or a system of rules which regulate behaviour within a society. So there are rules in the university, they constitute the university's laws to effect. Laws can operate in a particular environment, such as employment, immigration, commercial, human rights. There are lots of different types of law. When I came to uni, I had no idea there was going to be so many different types of law, but you soon pick them up and you can soon see how they all interact and apply to one another. The laws in England and Wales can either come from Parliament, and this is called legislation. The bills must be passed through the House of Commons and then the House of Lords, and then receive royal assent from the monarch, the Queen, to become law. The House of Commons is a group of elected officials, and the House of Lords is a group of appointed officials. So that is one way we can make law, is by passing legislation through the houses. And they'll often be acts or bills, they'll be called the Word Act. The other way law can be made is the judiciary. So the judiciary just means a group of judges, the judges. The main role of the courts and judges is to interpret the laws that are made by Parliament, by the legislature. So they can apply that to the cases that they are judging. They can establish common law, which is the law determined by judges in cases where there is no law. So undoubtedly, when cases go to court, there are going to be times where parliamentary legislation has missed certain spots. And in that case, judges are able to interpret the law and apply it how they see is best to the case. So criminal law is probably the most famous area of law for most people. It regulates the behaviour of citizens and prohibits certain conduct. I'm sure you'll all know what a crime is, but a crime is something that you can be charged by the police and then is prosecuted by the Crown. The cases are generally set out as R, which stands for regina, and defendant, and we say that as the Crown and defendant. It sounds very noble and grand that the prosecution is prosecuting on behalf of the Crown, the Queen, but it just means that that is the prosecution for the state. The examples of crimes, I'm sure you all know, they're things like assault, murder, road traffic offences, things like that. They're heard either in front of a magistrate or a jury. So lower crimes that are considered to be less serious tend to be heard in a magistrate's court, not in front of a jury, but in front of a panel of trained officials called magistrates, and they will decide the case. Or the case may go to the Crown Court, and in that case, it will be heard in front of a jury, and the jury will decide the facts of the case, whether the verdict is guilty or not guilty, and then the judge will apply the law from there. The Crown has the burden of proof. So what that means, the burden of proof is the job of proving something. So the prosecution must prove that the defendant is either guilty or not guilty. The defendant does not have to prove anything in originally in English criminal law. And the standard of proof they must provide is beyond any reasonable doubt, which is a very high standard of proof, but it's done to give the system integrity. If the defendant may be found guilty, in which case the judge will sentence them, or not guilty, and then that means they are acquitted.
So I'm just going to briefly talk about the civil law, which is very different from the criminal law. However, you can find some cases where there will be tie-ins, such as what Scarlett has stated. If someone had assaulted someone else, the Crown may bring a criminal case against them, but the individual who was assaulted could also bring a civil case against them for reparations and damages, basically money for the injury caused. So the civil law generally regulates disputes between individuals and organizations. These disputes can be brought by any individual involved in it. There's certain words and terms that are used here. So the claimant is the individual who brings the claim, and the defendant is the one who is defending the claim. Both individuals or organizations can bring evidence in front of the judge. The cases are heard in private in front of the judge or multiple judges, but there is no jury, which is very different from the criminal law. Examples of civil law include contract, family, property, or tort cases. We'll explain what some of these mean a bit later on, because we understand that tort is a very new word. The judge is the one who decides who is liable or not liable on the balance of probabilities. So, for example, Scarlett mentioned in criminal cases, the balance is on, the standard of proof is on beyond a reasonable doubt, whereas in civil, there's a much lower standard of proof, and this is just the balance of probabilities. So it means that the judge will weigh up the evidence and decide whose case is a bit more stronger than the other ones, if that makes sense. And then they are told to either could be like enforce the contract, maybe a parent is awarded custody over their child, something like that. So we also have a public law, which is the law that regulates the relationship between the state and individuals. There's still a lot of this in human rights law because a lot of it will come from Parliament. So it is made up of constitutional and administrative law, tax law, criminal law, etc. In England, the constitution is not written or codified. However, for the creation of public bodies, such as the Crown Prosecution Service, who is the ones that bring cases in criminal cases, they are usually regulated by legislation brought by Parliament. If those public bodies act unlawfully, those affected can challenge the behavior or decision. And there are 4 ways in which a decision can be challenged, such as a complaint through a public body complaint procedure or ombudsman. And then there's a right of appeal to a tribunal, and then asking a public body to review its decision, and finally judicial review. It's very important that we have all these stages, and usually in order to bring a case for judicial review, you need to go through all the previous stages. And judicial review is an important process which allows a judge to determine whether a public body has behaved unlawfully. So I'm just going to briefly talk about 2 common types of civil law that you will most likely see in the moot problems which we present to you. So the first one is contract law, which kind of sounds serious, but really people enter contracts on a day-to-day basis. If you go and buy something at the supermarket, that is technically a contract. So contracts arise out of voluntary agreements to create rights and obligations. For example, if I went to the supermarket and I bought milk, then I am agreeing to buy the milk for a certain price, and the shop has an obligation to give me the milk, if that makes sense. This is shown from a meeting of the minds, consensus ad idem. Disputes can arise from intention to create a contract, breach of contract, or termination of contract. The court can remedy this by awarding damages or ordering enforcement of a contract. A lot of the bigger contract law disputes can be found in commercial sense. So a lot of the time, a company will agree to something. However, either they are unsure of what the contract is because it's not clear, or they agree to do something but then don't have the money or the employees to fulfill that contract. And then the buyer or seller could bring a case against them in court. So I know this is like a lot of new information. So here we will come back to tort law. Tort law concerns individuals who have suffered as a result of a breach of a protected interest. So in general terms, this means that one person, maybe there's injury to that person's safety or property or financial security, something like that. And tort is almost entirely based on case law. Case law means any law that was created by the judiciary, not Parliament. Negligence is a common example of a tort which concerns damages caused by a breach of duty of care. For example, a doctor has a duty of care to patients and producers have a duty of care to consumers. Damages can be sought for injury, economic loss, and psychiatric harm. And the court can remedy this by awarding damages, ordering a specific action, or ordering an injunction to prevent action.
Hello everyone. So what you see in front of you now is the court system in England and Wales. We'll just go through both sides of it, the criminal side and the civil side, and then we can move on. So starting on the left-hand side first, you can see how criminal cases go through the hierarchy. Right at the bottom is the magistrates' court. This here's lower kind of tier crimes, for example, theft and breach of the peace. Above that court is the Crown Court. This here is much more serious types of crimes such as murder, attempted murder or sexual assaults. And both at the Crown Court, this can be appealed to the Court of Appeal, which hears appeals from the trials. All decisions in the Court of Appeal can then go to the Supreme Court as well, which is it's the highest court in the United Kingdom. Not only does the Supreme Court hear cases from England and Wales, it also hears cases from the devolved administrations of the United Kingdom, which is Scotland, as Scotland has a separate legal system to England and Wales. On the other side, on the civil cases, they start at the County Court, which is the lowest court. The County Court hears very low cost civil disputes, such as perhaps personal injury or if someone owes a debt. Higher above that is the High Court of Justice, which is split into 3 different divisions. You have the Queen's Bench, which hears disputes relating to personal injury or human rights breaches. You then have the Family Dispute, which listens to issues of family law, including child abduction or divorce. And then you have the Chancery Division, which deals with disputes of a business nature between companies. Above that is the Court of Appeal. So all decisions of the County Court and High Court of Justice can then be appealed to the Court of Appeal, which has a number of judges sitting and hearing the cases. Again, all these cases can be appealed to the Supreme Court, which is the final court. After you get to the Supreme Court, there is no other appeal after that, so the Supreme Court's decision is final. Next slide, please. So the court structure, first of all, as for the Magistrates' Court and the County Court, these are the courts of first instance. Now, what this means is this is where the legal proceedings and cases are first brought and heard. And as we said, where the case is heard will depend on how serious the crime is or the value of the claim. Who decides the court? Well, as we've discussed, in criminal law, the verdict of guilty or not guilty will be decided by a judge or by a jury in more serious criminal trials. A jury is a group of 12 members of the public who have been chosen by random to decide the outcome of a trial. They all must be impartial and they must only listen to the facts of the case. They can't, for example, use Google or Wikipedia or anything like that. They can only ever listen to what is said in the court. Now, while the verdict might be decided by the jury in these trials, the judge will always choose the sentence, which again highlights the importance of the judge and why you should always respect them. In civil courts, most cases are only decided by a judge in the lower tier courts. However, in the higher courts, they can be decided by a group of judges. And in the Court of Appeal and in Supreme Court, it's always a group of judges who make the decision either unanimously or by a majority. So if a party is unhappy with the decision of a court, they can appeal it. A party wanting a change of judgment or through a lower court or a tribunal will have to appeal the decision in a higher court. And those higher courts are the Court of Appeal, and then above that is the Supreme Court after that. An appeal can be made on the basis that the decision of the case was wrong or unfair due to a procedural issue. You can't appeal on fact. So the lower courts are the only ones where the fact is stated, and what the fact stated in the lower courts are the ones that are always followed with. An appeal court can either affirm the previous decision. This simply means that they agree with the previous court and that they continue to enforce it. They can substitute its own judgment, or it can remit it back again to the lower courts for a further decision. Of course, after the Court of Appeal, so if someone, for example, goes from the Crown Court appeals to the Court of Appeal, they can again appeal right again up to the Supreme Court after that. Now, you're probably wondering, what is precedent? Well, it's a core doctrine of our common law systems here for example, here in the United Kingdom. It is a statement of law by a court which binds other courts which are of equal or lesser importance, and the court must always follow the judgment of a higher court. What this means is, for example, if the Supreme Court makes precedent on a certain legal issue, then the Court of Appeal and all the courts below that will have to enforce and follow by that decision. Now, what's the purpose of this rule? Well, it's to provide certainty in a system of law, which is cases as sources of law. As we've stated, not all laws decided by Parliament, but then it can be interpreted differently by the courts. So it ensures that there is a form of interpretation and that not every single court has unlimited interpretation at its disposal. So by following judicial precedent, some cases may not be binding on the court. Cases which are being heard in the higher courts will be binding on lower courts. For example, cases in the Supreme Court being decided by the Court of Appeal. And judges may take lower court decisions into account. For example, the Supreme Court could take into account the court decisions made by the Court of Appeal. Now, while these cases may not be binding, they may be very persuasive. So as we've said, binding is where they have to follow the law as set out by the higher courts. What persuasive cases are is where they may contain relevant legal principles, and every court can consider this case. They can also include cases from other jurisdictions. For example, England and Wales might consider a case in Scotland, even though Scottish cases aren't binding in England and Wales, and vice versa. This means if the law is changing in Scotland, then the courts may consider this the right move and follow suit.
Hi everyone. Sorry, I'm just gonna take you through a few terminology just to help you understand more, get a head start on the reading. So first of all, a magistrate is a lay justice in the magistrate's court who will deal with minor crimes or disputes. The common law system, as Rory's briefly mentioned, is a system where the nation's main source of law is case law, which essentially means decisions reached by the court's judges form precedent and are binding depending on that hierarchical position of that court. So an example of common law would be a rule made by a judge which states people have to enter into a contract. Ratio decidendi essentially means the reason for a decision. It is the rule of law on which a judicial decision is based. Often a ratio is decided not just by the case itself, but how subsequent judges have applied, interpreted, limited, and extended the principles in any given case. So every case adjudicated is decided according to a rule or principle, which will be discoverable from the opinion or judgment itself. There's more on the reading if this is confusing a little bit. Obiter dictum, obiter dicta, means something or some things said in the decision which are not part of the ratio and therefore not binding authority. Essentially, this describes the legal reasoning of a judge, which is not included in the ratio. Often observations upon the law or hypothetical examples. Whilst these are never binding, they are often persuasive. Stare decisis means to let the decision stand. This means to treat all cases alike and follow the legal reasoning of earlier courts in similar cases. So it's important because it ensures cases with similar facts and scenarios are approached in the same way. And this it makes it by binding the courts to follow the legal precedents set by previous decisions. To distinguish a case from a binding authority, you're essentially arguing that the facts in the earlier case were not similar enough for the ratio to be on point. So if a judge wishes to disregard a particular authority, which is bound by to follow, they can do this by arguing that the material facts in the ratio are significantly different. For the jurisdiction is the legal term for an authority the court has to determine a dispute. So it may also refer to the territory over which the legal authority of the court extends. So, for example, a binding English authority will not be binding in Scots law, but will be highly persuasive if it's a high enough court. So using the textbook, there'll be a table of cases which will direct you to the page or pages where the case is mentioned. And you can find this after the contents pages of all textbooks, and the cases will be listed alphabetically. There'll also be a table of legislation, which will direct you to this section or sections of the Act and the pages which they're mentioned, which can also be found after the contents page of all the textbooks and will be listed alphabetically. This will really help for your legal research for our moots. So the recommended reading, you don't have to do it straight away, but it's just important before you do a moot or something like that to have read it. But there's the English legal system, what is law, and judicial precedent are some important areas to look at. And then in tort law, the start of that will really help your understanding for our moots. And then in contract law, the first chapter, and criminal law, the readings there. So I thought of a few questions for you to answer, which will just test your understanding of what we've kind of started to explain to you today. All the answers will be found in the recommended reading, so feel free to talk about it with your classmates and discuss the answers to the questions. So yeah. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the question box or send them on.
Could I just quickly add to what we would...
Oh, I think Scarlett's... You've muted yourself,
Okay,
Scarlett.
can everyone hear me now? All of those, so what I was saying was, to what we were just saying about the questions, all of those questions will form a sort of basis for the workshops that we will be doing. Like Louise said, you can do them collaboratively. They just sort of consolidate the knowledge we've been talking about today and really set a good foundation for your legal research skills and your skills in mooting, but as well as just your skills that are applicable to everyday life as well. I also wanted to just say, Rory, and I think I actually mentioned it as well, how the Scots law system is different to the English law system. Although Dundee is in Scotland, you can study purely English law. That's what I'm doing. And it's actually really useful in my experience to hear from people who are doing Scots law, to hear about the system, and kind of gives you an overview about law in general. But yeah, I just wanted to add those things in case there was any confusion.
Fantastic. That's
just to answer the question in the chat. Yeah, we'll be sharing the slides that we've used today. We'll also be sharing them every time we do a lecture, and we'll be sending the link to the video and the recording for people to watch when that gets uploaded as well.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Kelsey. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes, perfect. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in. I had a question which I'm really interested in. So I wanted to know, at civil and criminal courts, do the same judges preside over both sorts of cases, or do you have judges that are specific to criminal law and judges that are specific to civil?
So that can happen, but what tends to happen is judges will specialise in an area, and if, for example, you go to the Supreme Court where there's a number of judges sitting, I won't say how many because I don't want to give away the question to one of the answers, the answer to one of the questions rather, then there will be judges which have a high level of experience in different areas of law. So there'll be a judge that has a really high level of experience in contract law or equity and trusts or property, and they tend to give the leading judgments on those cases. So although judges may have practiced or judged in different areas, what tends to happen is that they have an area that they are specialised in.
Fantastic. And Scarlett, I'm just going to say, if you want to unshare that presentation again, I will lift off all of those questions to answer and send them all into in an email to all of the schools that are involved, so that you have a visual reference that you can send out to all the students as well. So a couple of other questions that have come up, which I think it's worth asking. Does the head of state have any power to give a ruling?
That's a very interesting question. So obviously here in the UK, the head of state is technically the monarch, and it is required that royal assent is received after Parliament passes a law. It is constitutional convention that the monarch gives that assent. Someone might know, I do not know when the last time a monarch didn't give that.
I can say that with my historical hat on, actually. So that all came about during the Civil War. It is now recognised that the head of state, the monarch, because they devolve their power really through the House of Commons and then also the House of Lords, which is the executive power within the UK, that actually they sign on the dotted line without too many questions. So that's a kind of very unofficial way of saying it. I'm sure that Prof. Peter would have a very more legal way of a legal terminology. But I think that answers that, Brenda. But that's a great question.
Could I just answer Mike's question, if that's okay, about what subjects would highly favour a law career? So if you want to study law, it might be best to do subjects that have some sort of analysis or critique of something. There's no specific subjects that you have to do, obviously, because not a lot of people get the subject of law when they're in high school. I did history and modern studies when I was at school, but then I also did advanced maths and science. So anything's helpful, and anything that you find interesting really would probably benefit a law career.
I can jump in there and say for my A-levels, I actually did further maths and physics. And I find them very applicable to my law degree now, but don't confine yourselves, do the subjects you enjoy the most. If it's critical and analytical, you can apply it to law. And especially with maths, I found, the argument of a logical argument to reach a conclusion, that is so much of what law is about. And so you can apply, as long as it's applicable to law and you can find a way to do that, don't box yourself in too much. But there is a lot of essay writing, I will say that as well.
Fantastic. And just to let you guys know that I will send out the presentation as well to all of the schools. So I think that might be helpful because there's a lot of information involved in there, which is really good. If you do English law, can you practice law in Scotland? So a little bit of history here that might be interesting actually is the reason why we study English law at the University of Dundee as well as Scots law. So we do have, we have two main undergraduate degrees. We have our Scots law, which is a 4-year degree, and then we have our 3-year English and Northern Ireland LLB. And the reason that we have that English law degree at the University of Dundee is through our connection with St Andrews University, which we were originally a part of when we used to be Dundee College, that was part of Royal College Dundee, I can't remember, which was part of St Andrews University. And we always held law up in Dundee. So when we became independent in 1967 from the University of St Andrews, we retained law. And as a result, we study English law here, as well as Scots law. And we do also have a dual qualifying degree as well, which is interesting. So there are lots of different processes once you've graduated with an undergraduate law degree to actually become a practicing solicitor or to move into other aspects of a career within the legal sort of services, as it were. But you will get lots of information about this as we go through, and you can always drop me a message if you have specific questions. So I think we've answered that one. We've answered that one about the documents. Good afternoon. Can we know if the moot competition would be based on civil or criminal law, or will it be a mixed affair?
We will be doing problems from both sides, but the principles will remain the same. You'll find it's not that different. And I think it was mentioned earlier that a moot is a appellate court, so you'll never be arguing in front of a jury. You'll never be arguing a point of evidence. You'll always be arguing a point of law. It's not a mock trial where you're cross-examining someone on trial. You're arguing your point of law in front of a judge. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think we've had lots of recommendations about subjects, subjects to study at school. So I think we've kind of answered that one. Is the information on the slides based around the English legal system? Yes. So international students normally come to study the 3-year English LLB course. The reason being is that it's based on common law principles, which is probably more applicable back home in their own country. So that's what we tend to find that most international students come and do. So that's why we've based the lectures on that. Do you guys want to, can you see the kind of non-law degree join the competition and lectures if interested? Well, speak to your counsellors at school, but I don't have a problem with that, and I'm sure that the students here don't have a problem with that either.
Yeah, we hosted our internal competition last year. One of the winners was actually a forensic anthropology student. So she was so good, and obviously it shows that you don't need to do law to do it. And obviously we'll be providing support and lectures for the legal aspect, because we know that law is difficult, but for the mooting and the presentation, that's all just confidence and public speaking, and you won't be in a bad position if you don't want to do law or you're not a law student. So.
And is the actual moot court competition going to be online? Yes, it is, because unfortunately we can't be with you in person this year. We're not traveling at the moment from the University of Dundee, and it's allowing more and more people to take part, which is fantastic. So we have a whole series of workshops set up, and then there'll be a competition in January, and then there'll be a more international competition later on in the year as well. So lots to look forward to. What does a law degree entail? That is a huge question. So I think probably that's one that you want to send to me direct. If this is from a student, then you could get your counsellor or your teacher to give you my details, and I'm happy to type my email in just now. So email me directly, and I'll give you a little bit more information about that. And Celestine has a question about practicing English law in terms of countries. Well, that's an enormous, I'm not going to go through every single country, but it's any country really where common law is practiced. Every country will have their own law societies and their own ways of qualifying as a legal professional, but you can take your English law degree back, and then there will be usually some kind of further exams or qualifications that you will need to take in order to actually, qualify as a solicitor or a legal professional in that way. Does the University of Dundee give scholarships? Yes, again, contact me directly about that. I'll put my email address in the chat for you all. Contact me directly about that. Guys, I think we've given some answers about books because we've sent books to all of the schools that are involved in the mooting competitions. My goodness me, there are so many books that you could read. Where would you start? It's I think that's really an enormous question, isn't it, you guys? Did you have a favorite book or a book that you could recommend for first-year law students that you use a lot?
I can't remember the author.
Letters to
The Letters to a Law Student was good. It helped me to sort of prepare myself a bit, and just it's not very big, and it's not giving you information about the law, it's giving you more information about what life is like as a law student. But honestly, I think the best thing to do is speak to people who are doing law, or if you can, or if you take part in this competition, I think it is quite an accurate depiction of what a lot of law school is like. We do a lot of things like this, of mooting and analysing legal texts.
So scholarships, again, I'll answer that question privately. So what I would say is that good academic grades will stand you in good stead in terms of scholarships. So you should be really thinking about putting your all at this point in time into your academic studies, because that is most likely to get you the best level of scholarship anywhere, really. Do we study international law as part of a standard LLB at the University of Dundee?
It is an elected module, and we do international law, and then we do international private law, and then international criminal law. So there are quite a few options for you to take if you want to do it, but I think those are optional modules, but there are modules that touch on things like the EU and the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. So yeah, and we're just so influenced by international law as well that it always comes up.
Fantastic. And there is a question that's come up again about debate skills. So is that what a moot competition is about? Is it about debating? I'm going to let you guys answer that. I have my own opinion about it, but I'll let you guys answer that. I think Scarlett and Rory seem to be frozen. So you're going to have to unmute yourselves, Kelsey.
So there are a lot of skills which are transferable, from debating to mooting, which is like public speaking, pace, being able to articulate your words, but then it is different because there's not often a large chance for rebuttal, and you will have done a lot of preparation beforehand. We put a lot of onus on your research and your preparation beforehand. And you have to remember, you're like talking to a judge. So it's very different, and you have to make sure that they understand what you're saying and you can lead them through the evidence that you've supplied for them. Does that make sense?
I think, is everyone able to hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I think as well, another thing, it's one thing that is really valued in mooting is the etiquette, your court etiquette. There's not the same sort of winning and losing. There is a winner and someone who didn't win, but there's not the same sort of competition in that way. It's like Kelsey said, it's well prepared, the moot is, and there's a high standard of etiquette in the room, and there is some chances for rebuttal, but again, as Kelsey said, they're not as big, and you can't interject in an opponent's argument. you have your submission and they have theirs. So I think that is one of the key differences with debating as well.
Fantastic. You can probably hear me typing away in the background. I'm just typing a few answers to the questions in the chat. And Anne Mariette has asked, can studying law in the UK affect my law career when I come back to my native country? Well, I think the most important thing is that you make sure that you graduate with the best degree that you possibly can. And as I explained earlier, every country will have its own legal processes, its own, I mean, for example, in Scotland, we have the Law Society of Scotland. In England, I can't remember what the name of the body is, but you will remind me, guys. And they set their own exams and their own qualifications. Those are changing actually in England and Wales at the moment, are in the process of change. But every country will have its own body which sets qualifications that you then need to pass once you've got your undergraduate degree. So there's no reason why having an English law degree if your country, and it's worth checking with your law society or whatever that body it is, it's worth checking what law degrees are allowed. But if your country has predominantly common law judicial system, then English law will be what it's based on. So you know, it'll be absolutely fine and beneficial to your career, provided you get a good result. Okay, well, a lot of the questions that are coming up now are related to scholarships and slightly more detailed questions. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. I'm never very good at speaking and doing things at the same time, but I'm going to put my email in the chat, and I'm going to stop the recording just now. We will process the recording and we'll send it on to you, but we'll also put it up on our YouTube channel, which we will give you details of so that you can access that whenever you like and use it as a resource. We'll send you details of the presentation as well, so that you have a copy of the questions that students have set, which will be really useful for you guys to all have a look at or to give to your students. And if there's anything else that you have any questions about in the meantime, we have our WhatsApp group. So if you want to be a part of that WhatsApp group, then you can connect with me through the telephone number that I'm going to put up here just now as well. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to suggest that one of the students just wraps up from a student perspective here, and then I will get back and close the session properly. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you all very much for coming along. I've had more fun than I initially thought. I was a little bit nervous at the start. But thank you all for coming. I hope you've learned something. As Libby said, if you do have any specific questions about studying law, please do contact her. But hopefully we'll see you again soon to talk more about mooting, talk more about the skills involved. I really can't recommend it enough. I also can't recommend a law degree enough. It's something I enjoy so much, and I'm so glad I turned to. But yeah, thank you all for coming. I know we've all really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys learned something. Fantastic.
Thanks very much, Scarlett. Kelsey, Louise, do you want to add anything to that, or does that suitably wrap up the session from your perspective?
I think that wraps up, but obviously next week we will be back with an introduction to mooting. And hopefully you'll know more about what exactly it entails and how the internal competition might be structured. And again, the recording and slides will be shared for that after.
Fantastic. And we will, of course, give you details of the workshops that will be coming up in November as well. So from us all in Dundee, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And we are very much looking forward to seeing you guys next week. So from us all, cheerio.